back, everyone, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with me on this Tuesday afternoon. A lot to dive into with the Georgia Bulldogs. We're going to talk about some coaching hires for Georgia. We're going to talk about the NFL Combine coming up. 10 Bulldogs have been invited there. Some recruiting news, some not great recruiting news for Georgia in the 2027 class. Also going to talk Georgia baseball, Georgia basketball, another action-packed episode ahead. Before we get into it, guys, I wanted to bring up, it's been a pretty impressive run here lately for some professional Bulldogs. Anthony Edwards, All-Star MVP over the weekend. Going back to the NFL season, Matthew Stafford, NFL MVP, and James Cook was the NFL's leading rusher. Kipp, it seems like it's been a pretty good run for some of these Bulldogs in the pros.
Yeah, I think also George Pickens in the Pro Bowl as well, right? Was he the Pro Bowl MVP? So, yeah, Georgia's kind of tearing it up at the professional level right now. And, I mean, I'm not surprised. I think just the production overall from, the football program speaks for itself. Basketball program, I mean, the Anthony Edwards commitment was just such a huge moment. And then, I've replayed the video of him and Jalen Johnson talking to myself at least 300 times just to make sure he's definitely not just talking about getting wings in Atlanta. I mean, he's coming back to Atlanta, but that's more of an end of the show thing for me. Rand, as far as number one overall picks, the ones the Hawks didn't get but should have gotten. They were one like ping pong ball away from getting Anthony Edwards, but that's how it goes. But for Georgia, yeah, like I said, huge season overall at the professional level, and that shouldn't hurt either program on the recruiting trails when you're able to point and say, yeah, we've got the best of the best, at the highest level. So I know you guys NIL's here now, but the biggest checks possible are down the road at these programs. So I think that's outstanding off-season advertising for Georgia.
It's bad when I initially thought that the Anthony Edwards, Jalen Johnson thing, I was like, that's got to be AI. Like I'm not going to believe it, not going to get my hopes up. Ben, what do you think about this recent run? Some Bulldogs doing some big things.
I mean, the All-Star game for both. I know people don't care about All-Star games anymore, not in either sport, but George Pickens and Anthony Edwards winning the All-Star game MVP in both of the two biggest sports in the country right now. I mean, that says something. I don't know what it says, but it certainly says something. So I love watching Anthony Edwards play. I think everybody loves watching Anthony Edwards play. I love the way that he's wired. I mean, it's a shame Georgia wasn't able to turn the Anthony Edwards experience in Georgia, not even into more during his season, but just more in terms of what it really meant for Georgia basketball. Because, and I know COVID unfortunately played a somewhat of a role in that probably there at the end, but yeah, he's awesome to watch. Like he's he wins the MVP and he says like, yeah, I started playing hard because I saw Wemby was playing hard and I wasn't about to let Wemby play harder than we were playing. It's like a credit to Wemby that Wemby's playing in an All-Star game and he's a young guy and he's this phenom, yet he's approaching the All-Star game like it's an important basketball game. And I think the more Wembys and Anthony Edwards that exist, the more compelling All-Star games have the opportunity to be, because really all it takes for an NBA All-Star game to be compelling is to have 15 Anthony Edwards running around that just want to be better than all the other people on the court. And there hasn't been that with the All-Star game. So I'm hoping that maybe Anthony Edwards is a little bit of a pioneer when it comes to that.
Fingers crossed. So we've seen the NFL Pro Bowl MVP. We've seen the NBA All-Star MVP. Charlie Condon.
Yes, sir.
Time to just really take MLB by storm, and maybe we're talking about him as the MLB All-Star MVP come the summer. Well, guys, we got some hires to talk about for Georgia football. We've got one on field and a few others, and I'll just rattle these off, and we'll talk about a couple of these very in-depth. The big news on Tuesday, Georgia getting ready to hire West Virginia pass rush specialist Larry Knight. Larry's going to be the outside linebackers coach. He's going to replace Jadera Uzo-Duribe, who left for the NFL. Some support staff hires. Robert Edwards, the former Georgia running back, he's coming on board as assistant running backs coach. Mo Smith, coming back to Georgia as well. Another Georgia alum, he's going to help as a defensive analyst. And then Jalen Harris has been promoted as an assistant receivers coach. Let's talk about the most recent of these hires, or the pending hire that's coming with Larry Knight. This is a guy I'm really excited about. This is a guy that we've talked about over on the Junkyard, a guy that I think checks a lot of boxes. He had just gotten to West Virginia. He was at Arkansas State last year. The Red Wolves were tied for the Sun Belt lead in sacks. I believe they ended the year with 39. A guy that knows the state of Georgia well. He's from Augusta. He has coached at Georgia Tech. He has coached at Georgia State. He had an internship with the Atlanta Falcons. I think he checks a lot of boxes, a lot of things to be excited about. Something interesting, too. Hoping to have a story for the folks listening, the folks watching, talking to some of his former players. And one of his former players is Nazir Stackhouse. He was an intern with the Green Bay Packers. I'm hoping we can track Nas down and get his thoughts on this hire. But I'll start with you, Ben. What do you think about Larry Knight stepping in to that outside linebacker's role, and what you know about him and how you think he'll fit in?
Makes a lot of sense for a lot of reasons. Like you just mentioned, he's from Augusta. He's coached at Georgia State. He's coached at Georgia Tech. He's interned with the Falcons. Like, he's someone that knows the state of Georgia really, really well. I don't want to make this a big philosophical edge conversation, but like, it's hard to recruit edges at the top of the board nowadays because it's a very expensive position. And we know how Georgia is going to handle guys coming out of high school. Not to say that they won't push the edge a little bit, not play on words, but at that position. But it's a position group where I think that you have to know the state of Georgia really, really well to be able to find the Quintavious Johnsons of the world, the Chase Lintons of the world, who I know ended up being a top 50 prospect. So that's probably not exactly right. But you got to find those types of guys in the state of Georgia that Georgia wants to be successful. So it's someone that knows the state really, really well. I talked in the last episode. He's probably a little older of a guy than I would have been expecting. I mean, he's, been around coaching for quite some time at this point in a lot of different capacities. So clearly that wasn't as big of an issue. I mean, Georgia was looking for someone that I think, like you said, he was at Arkansas State last year. He was making the jump to West Virginia. Being able to go from Arkansas State to Georgia in 1 year is a big career improvement for Larry Knight. So I think that this is something that is going to give his career sort of like a second wind to it. Not to say that he's like super old, but I think he's older than Chidera Uzodiribe is right now. So they're hiring a guy that's older than the guy that had just left them, that had been there for 4 years. And so, but I think what it really comes down to, and you mentioned it, Georgia feels pretty good about its edges right now, or its outside backers right now. I think it comes in run support. We talked about Georgia's sack numbers over and over and over again. And I don't know how much one guy, one coach is going to change you overnight into being a pass rush specialized team, but he is labeled as a pass rush specialist. He was one of the top, his unit was top 10 in the country or something like that in sacks. I think they tied for the highest sack total in a single game last season. So he clearly has something. I've heard some former players make comments on social media. I've talked to some other coaches around the Southeast that have sort of gotten to know him a little bit through recruiting and things like that. And like, I think that's his expertise, is getting to the passer. And Georgia clearly went out and said, who is going to give Georgia in the 2026 season the best chance to improve from what Kipp's brought up multiple times, like the worst sack numbers we've seen this century from Georgia. And even Kirby Smart can downplay it all he wants. He's not going to let that happen again. And whatever it takes for that not to happen again, he's going to try and do. And I think that that's why he took his time with this process, and why we heard 4 or 5 names linked to it, but ultimately landed on someone whose expertise was getting after the quarterback.
Ben hit on something that I was going to point out. I'm sure when we get Kirby in spring practice, someone's going to bring up, your sack numbers last year weren't that good, and he'll probably downplay it again and say, well, we weren't all that concerned. This hire tells you how seriously they took those concerns. And of the names that we were hearing as like the top options, I think Larry Knight is the one I like the most, just because of his experience and frankly, just because of the success. Ben mentioned, I think it was against Troy, that Arkansas State just had a ton of sacks last year. There are clips of him on YouTube and Instagram getting out there, with his guys and drills and like throwing himself out there. I think there's a lot to be excited about and hoping, like I said, to have a story for folks talking to some of his former players. Kipp, I want to change the question to you a little bit. You look at that room that Larry Knight is inheriting. He's got Quintavious Johnson. They've added Amaris Williams, and then you've got the three second-year outside linebackers. What do you think about the room he is inheriting and what he needs to do to get the most out of that room in 2026?
It seems like free money to me. Like I feel like he's walking into – I mean, at this point, is it really a resume-building opportunity? You're coaching at the University of Georgia now. And so I think that the talent – people are wondering recruiting, like transfer portal. I don't think Georgia's going to have to really approach next offseason like the transfer portal so much as they're going to have to retain the guys they have, because this looks like a group that's ready to be very productive for Georgia. So it's kind of like, Uzo Duribe, like it's not a selling low at him, but like this season is probably he's going to take a little bit more blame than he needed to, because if he would have been coaching for this team this season, we'd be talking about, okay, this is just like Trey Scott all over again. We just weren't patient enough. Like whoever was coaching this group was set up for success. The fact that they got someone who seems to check all the boxes is kind of a bonus. I mean, I just look back on that the Georgia Tech North Carolina game when they upset North Carolina. Drake May was the quarterback. They sacked him 6 times in that game. And I think about the fact that, he found Kyle Kennard out of Riverwood High School. And, it was after he had already transferred to South Carolina. But, I mean, you found a guy who was rated an 86 on 24/7 Sports and the composite. He ends up being the Bronco Nagurski Award winner, consensus All-American. That is exactly what you're looking for now when you're trying to get ahead of everyone in recruiting a guy who can, evaluate really well, obviously coach really well based on what he did with Keon White. And then, the production that was there. I think that bowl game, was it the Xbox Bowl? They had like 8 sacks against Missouri State. It was like the welcome to the FBS moment. You made it to a bowl game in your first year, but yeah, Larry Knight's guys just wreaked havoc on you. So I just think looking at this room, looking at the production, we said before, it feels like the only way they could go was up. But I just think retaining all these guys and then also increasing the talent level there they're set up for a huge year at pass rush. I think Kirby Smart, when he identifies that there is an issue, even though he's stubborn to admit it to us ever publicly, he's been really quick to act, and he's basically course corrected well every single time in his career.
All right, let's talk about another addition for Georgia, a name that I know Georgia fans will remember fondly. We found out on Monday that Robert Edwards is coming back to Georgia, former Georgia running back. Big brother of Terrence Edwards is going to come back. And as Kipp pointed out on our message board, he's a guy that comes to Georgia with a lot of high school coaching experience, I think right around 17 years. Kipp, what was it like seeing Robert Edwards' name pop up, and what do you think he can provide, specifically being a guy that played running back at Georgia and now he's going to be helping coach that position?
Unfortunately, it's hard to think about Robert Edwards without thinking about how stupid it is that they had a flag football game in the sand for the Pro Bowl, and think about, what could have really been as far as just freak accidents for Georgia running backs in the NFL. Like I think about all the different guys that got banged up. Robert Edwards is just an incredible person. His coaching career, like the fact that at Washington County, he took them to the playoffs as an alma mater every single year, but was let go. I thought that was just really unfortunate. But as far as just having a player connections coordinator, like you can't do any better than having Robert Edwards in there, I think. Like we're talking about knowing the state of Georgia well. Like, I mean, this is it. Like this is your liaison on a staff full of guys with these connections, but like you can't have enough. Like people just always, no matter how many guys Georgia recruits in the state of Georgia, it's like, oh, they're letting these guys fall through the cracks. Like, Georgia can only sign so many guys. But as far as just making sure that those connections at every school, even if they're not signing a guy, setting him up for future success, just having those relationships. I just think Robert's the perfect guy. And then obviously for the fans, it's just a huge win. You can't hire enough former Georgia guys. Like Kirby's tried, and like every single time, it's just not enough. So like, yeah, with the support staff, it gives you, I mean, I'll just say it, unlimited power. And then Kirby's taking advantage of it and adding a guy that at a position that, I mean, I think when David Hill got the job, like it was created at that point. Like no one, I don't think anyone had the job before him. It was kind of just we're adding support staff positions left and right. This one seems important, and plug him in. And now you can bring in a guy that just seems like he's a perfect fit for the job now. I just think this is a huge win for overall publicly for the Georgia program, but then behind the scenes. And congrats to Robert on this opportunity in his career. I mean, you got to get your foot in the door. He's got it now. And I think now he's got a chance to really just, make a name for himself in the coaching circles.
Yeah, really excited to hear from players once we get in spring what it's like having him around. And to what Kipp mentioned, David Hill comes over. He had coached Darnell Washington in high school. I think Darnell had already been at Georgia by the time that David Hill got in. He left this offseason to take an on-field role at Colorado State, which opened up that position. So great opportunity for Robert, and hope we get to see him at some practices. That would be neat to see him out there working with the running backs. Ben, I'll kind of pair him with the other hire that I mentioned, Maurice Smith, Mo Smith, the guy that transferred. It seems like it was just yesterday we were talking about all the transfer drama with him coming over from Alabama. And guys, I would kill for that to be all the transfer talk that we had now. It was a grad transfer, moving from one SEC team to another. But Ben, what do you think about Georgia going out and adding these two alums, the value that has? And also, Kirby's not going to just hire a guy because they went to Georgia, but what that does for the team, for recruiting, to have so many former Bulldogs on staff.
And I'll add Jalen Harris, a former player that's going to be a assistant wide receivers coach as well. Like Kirby Smart clearly sees the value, and he knows better than I think just about anyone in terms of the value of having people that care about Georgia, believe in what Georgia stands for, but also knows the history of what Georgia has been. I think that he, more than anyone, sees how valuable that can be. I think that he knows, and this is kind of played out not just at Georgia, like across college football. You look at coaches that are coaching at their alma mater, like they do, whether it's real or not, it seems that way, that they have a different work ethic, it seems, working on behalf of their school. Like it just feels like it has a different meaning to them. And I mean, Kirby Smart is obviously wired that way. I think that that's why you've seen him have guys like Todd Hartley be extremely successful, why he believes in Mike Bobo the way that he does, why he believed in Brian McClendon previously the way that he did, and why he's going to continue bringing guys back, because he just thinks that in this day and age, whatever it might be, being able to sell Georgia on why it's Georgia and what's special about Georgia, and that everyone that works for him, and not everyone that works for him, but a lot of people that work for him get it and truly get it and know what that means. Like that's something that matters to Kirby Smart, and that's not going to change. And I think that also, I think he's probably doesn't get enough credit for wanting to just do right on former players. Like he brought Mo Smith over from Alabama to Georgia, and now you're kind of going to be more part of the Georgia community, the way transferring works and why the way people talk all the time, like, oh, you leave that school, all those alumni that you used to have, that network, like it goes away, which like it doesn't have to be that way, but people are petty, so that's how it works. But Kirby wants to do right on these players. Like, oh, Mo Smith, like I brought you over from Alabama to Georgia. Now I want you to be able to kickstart your coaching career in some capacity with Georgia on your resume. Like it is just the right way to do business in whatever profession it is that you're doing. And I think that Kirby Smart believes in that. And I think that a lot of that probably comes from, like, he comes from a coaching family. We hear stories all the time about his dad and Mike Bobo's dad and everyone helping everyone else get jobs around the state of Georgia so that they could pursue their career endeavors as high school football coaches. And I think Kirby Smart views the world that way, and he wants to give people those opportunities when he has the chance to do so. He's not going to do it if he doesn't think that you don't have a chance to make the Georgia football program better, but he still wants to provide those opportunities to guys that he feels he owes it to, I think.
We're going to throw in Javon Wims, too, that's come on board and helped. And he got a lot of praise. I believe that was Zachariah Branch talking about him during the last football season. Kipp, I feel like there's also a piece of this, too, with these two guys specifically. Robert Edwards was at Georgia when Kirby was a player, and then Maurice Smith played for Kirby. I have to imagine, like Ben said, totally agree, want to take care of former players, give them opportunities. But I have to understand, I have to imagine, Kipp, that Kirby knows these guys understand the expectation by coming back and working for Kirby Smart.
Yeah, especially with Maurice Smith. I mean, he actually basically auditioned for the role last year. So to voluntarily come back and want to do it again shows that he's okay with working under Kirby Smart. I mean, playing, working, different situation, but I mean, he wants more of that abuse apparently, and then that's what he's in for. With Robert, you have such a long working relationship. I think it's established on both sides. Like he knows going in what's expected of him, and Kirby is, I mean, known him long enough to know that he fits what they're looking for in the program. So it's not like this isn't a Zoom interview with these guys. Like he's had these guys around in his life long enough in person, having Robert on campus, having Maurice in the program for several years now, to just know that these guys can help him win football games and help retain some of the guys on the roster, because that's just going to be a huge part of the process. I think you got to build your staff that way. Like, who are guys that can convince the players on campus this is where they should be if they're not starting? And I think that's just that you got to have guys that have been through it at Georgia. And I mean, Maurice Smith can come in and say, hey, like, I came in here and, was very productive for Kirby. I followed him here, took a chance, and it worked out really well for me. So I just think that you get different perspectives on things. It helps Kirby Smart build a more just versatile program instead of just, you can have just recruiters, you can have just technicians. You also just want guys that just know exactly what it was like to play for Kirby or have known Kirby his entire life and have, walked the walk. So I just think that I like the value in these additions. And then even with Jalen Harris, this goes back to what I said before. I don't think this was a position before. I know they had Javon Wims working and helping James Coley on staff last season, but I think that was like a volunteer coaching role. So an actual paid staff role, who isn't going to be against having more wide receiver coaches out there? We talk about the wide receiver position as much as any position on the podcast. So getting more help there, it sounds like, that's a huge win for Kirby Smart. The more staff they can have help those guys, the more time that Kirby and his guys have to do what they need to be doing on a day-to-day basis.
Let's talk about some former Bulldogs who are getting ready for the NFL Combine. Last week we learned that 10 former Bulldogs have been invited to this year's Combine. That's Dylan Bell, Zachariah Branch, Colby Young, Oscar Delp, Monroe Freeling, Micah Morris, Christian Miller, CJ Allen, Dalen Everett, and Brett Thorson. I'll start with you, Kipp. Is there one or two of those guys you really want to watch at the Combine? Guys that you think, when it's all said and done, have a chance to really boost their stock ahead of the draft?
Well, I'm going to be really interested just to see the reaction whenever Zachariah Branch measures in. Just want to see, if people are still saying the same things. And then when he's out there doing the actual drill work, and we're going to talk about his route tree, his development, what does the NFL think of him as a wide receiver? I'm interested in that. As far as a guy that I think can purely help his stock, I'll just go with Oscar Delp. I think Oscar Delp's going to go up there and tear it up. And I mean, we've seen the athletic plays that he's made. We debate on whether, how often the tight end position is used in the passing game. I think as far as him out there running routes and him testing and all that, I think he's really going to help himself. Maybe he's a 4th to 5th round guy now. Maybe he gets the end of round 2, early round 3. I think that's somewhere where he could fall. Him and Dalen Everett are both guys that I think can move up an entire day at the Combine.
Yeah, that was going to be my pick with Oscar Delp. Even saw earlier Tuesday some folks, NFL draft folks on Twitter talking about, hey, we think Oscar Delp can get to the NFL and be more productive statistically than he was at Georgia, and I see a real opportunity there. I'll take the low-hanging fruit and look at Monroe Freeling. This is a guy that could work his way into being a first-round pick. I think a guy that, going back to when he declared, talking again about NFL Twitter, saw a lot of folks talking about, hey, don't sleep on this guy. This guy's got, real talent, a guy that can be one of the top offensive tackles off the board. Some real interest there. And I would agree with Kipp on Zachariah Branch. We all know what he can do, but what do his measurables look like, and how does he perform in those drills? Going to be really interesting. Ben, anyone you want to shout out, anyone that you're paying attention to when we get to the combine?
Well, I'll start by agreeing completely on Zachariah Branch. It's going to be fascinating. Like, he's going to be very short. He also is probably going to end up having one of the best vertical leaps of all the wide receivers. Like, I don't know what all he's going to participate in, but like the jumps, I think his 40 is going to be faster. I was going back and looking at some of his high school 100-meter dash times, and it's like, I think he's going to run way better than I thought that he was going to run at the combine. And it's just going to be really fascinating, like how these teams, all it takes is one, but like how these teams really judge Zachariah Branch, because you have to use him, as Georgia did, you have to use him differently, I think, than you're using just about any other wide receiver that you're going to have. But if you use him the right way, he can be a really big weapon, I think, no matter what level of football that he's playing at. So fascinating prospect, and just his combine, I think, will be fascinating in terms of what the response to it is. Because I think it's going to be one of those things where people are going to be stunned. I don't think anybody in the Georgia world is going to be stunned, but I think a lot of people are going to be stunned when he measures in and they're like, wow, I didn't realize Zachariah Branch was that short. But it's like, that's just, that's how I think it's going to play out. Anyway, enough Zachariah Branch. We all agree on that one. Kipp did bring up the guy that I'm curious about the most, probably, and that's Dalen Everett. He, like Kipp said, I think has the combine ability to play himself up an entire day if he depending on how things go. Like, I think we've seen it in the past. Like, George Pickens was this way, where we knew that George Pickens was a good player, and then he goes and runs like a 4.39. I think everyone's like, holy moly, I didn't know that George was moving like that. I think we're going to see some of that with Dalen in a variety of the different drills. And again, I don't know exactly what everyone's going to participate in at the combine, but I think Dalen is someone that when he gets measured in, he's going to be long. He's going to run really, really well. He's going to move really, really well. I think he's going to show up pretty strongly in that setting. And I think that the more teams have a chance to look back at 3 full years, a guy playing cornerback for 3 full years for Kirby Smart doesn't happen a ton. And I think that when you look at the recent history of it, like the Kamari Lassiters that sort of get overlooked in a way that they shouldn't, I think people are going to end up gravitating more towards a Georgia cornerback that played a lot of snaps for Kirby Smart that's going to test as well as I think that Dalen Everett's going to end up testing.
It's going to be interesting to follow. I did want to shout out too, want to see what Christian Miller does, defensive tackle. Yeah. I think a guy that, some of those interior defensive linemen, especially at Georgia, do not rack up big numbers. I still think really highly of Christian Miller. Want to see how he winds up testing and what his measurables look like. That'll get underway. I believe drills are going to start next Thursday, so we'll keep an eye on that. Big opportunity, and once again, I anticipate several Georgia players are going to take advantage of that opportunity. We'll take a quick break, but before we do that, hey, let's shout out Georgia women's tennis. They won the indoor national title last week. Really entertaining match against Ohio State. They win 4-3. They won the indoor national title last year. They won the outdoor national title last year, and now they defend their indoor national championship. Drake Bernstein now with 3 national titles as the head coach. And hey, shout out freshman Denise Dillick. She was the number 3 singles player. That came down to that match. She fell behind in the tiebreaker in the 3rd set. She was down 5-0, worked her way back, wound up winning a very incredible match to watch. Want to shout out Georgia women's tennis, add another national title for UGA. I think now the University of Georgia's got 53 team national titles over the years, so big shout out there. Before we take a break, too, want to mention Still have our 50% off sale going on at Dawgs 24/7. Go take advantage of that. You got all these coaching hires going on, and spring practice is just about a month away at this point. We've got Georgia men's basketball going on, trying to make the NCAA tournament again. Georgia baseball just finished its first series, so a great time to sign up. You got Ben Wolk with all the recruiting updates and intel, doing a great job there. So hope you guys will join us on the Junkyard. A great time to sign up. So we'll take a quick break, come back and talk a little recruiting news. We'll talk Georgia baseball, we'll talk Georgia basketball, and close this thing down. All right, Ben, Georgia got some recruiting news since the last time we recorded. They lose 2027 wide receiver Gavin Honore. What can you tell us on that front as far as Gavin decommitting and maybe what we should be on the lookout for when they look at wide receivers in this class?
If I'm just being truthful about it, I probably have not ever been I've probably never been less subtle when suggesting that I don't think a guy is necessarily going to wind up with Georgia. There's a few reasons for that. I mean, this was a guy who was at Mater Dei High School and then just transferred to Bishop Gorman High School. I don't think Georgia historically, outside of IMG Academy guys notwithstanding, I don't think Georgia's done a great job historically when it comes to signing guys that have bounced around high schools. We just saw in the 2026 recruiting class that Georgia had Vance Spafford from the West Coast committed super early in his recruitment, a guy that's a 5'10" wide receiver from the West Coast. And when it came down to decision-making time for Georgia, now things didn't work out great for Georgia on that front because they end up losing Brady Marchese in the final stages of it. But I think what it comes down to is when you're looking for that quick twitch slot receiver type, if you're not going to be a kid from the state of Georgia, or in some cases probably the state of Florida, especially IMG Academy, you're probably not, like, you've got to be a really top of the board player to end up at Georgia in this day and age. And what I mean by that is, and everybody might have differing opinions on it, but Georgia has to put a value on each position group and what it means to what Georgia does, either offensively or defensively. And I think when you're looking at a guy that is a 5'9", 5'10" slot receiver, and Gavin Honore was on our recruiting show last year after he committed, and he talked about this, that like Georgia was giving him the opportunity to commit, and he knows that guys that are under 5'11", under 5'10", in that slot receiver, like there's only so many opportunities at premier schools for those types of guys. Most schools, Georgia included, aren't going to take multiple of those types of players because you just can't have an offense where multiple of those types of guys fit in. And so all that to say, Gavin Honore is going to be a more competitive recruitment than I think Georgia is willing to get into, knowing the caliber of players that exist within its own state. Like when you look at last cycle, it was Brady Marchese, who I know they didn't end up signing, but like you look at this cycle, you've got DJ Huggins from Harrison, who we don't actually have we don't have him ranked right now, but that will change in quick fashion throughout this spring. He's someone that Georgia's really high on. Sean Green from Camden County is high 4-star prospect for Georgia, or in the state of Georgia. He's someone that's going to be a really competitive recruitment that Georgia really likes. And so when you have those guys in the state, or even Marquise Fennell from Valdosta, Georgia, if we do go and talk a little bit about Florida, like IMG Academy has a guy named Eric McFarland Jr. that I don't think Georgia is likely to get right now, but that's someone that Georgia would 100% get into the mix for, and I think is probably the most Zachariah Branch comparison that exists in high school football recruiting right now. Eli Pearl is another guy from South Florida in Port Charlotte. All of these guys are options that I think Georgia has. And when you have those various options that are more in your recruiting footprint, it's going to be really hard for you to justify going and spending to get a West Coast guy to come across the country that's been at multiple high schools when you have all of these various options. So make no mistake, Gavin Honore is a very good player. I wouldn't be shocked if he ends up at another SEC program, or plenty of the West Coast options that he will also have choices from. But I know that he's someone that I think would prefer to play at the SEC level. So it's someone that you might see play against Georgia in the future. But I think Georgia looks around at its slot receiver options and it says, man, there is an abundance of choices that Georgia has to pick from. And if you're only going to really take one of those types of guys, you've got all the time in the world to determine who you think it is that is your best option. And you also are going to be able to kind of lay out, if you don't get this guy, whoever they determine as option A, you're still going to have option B, C, and D that you're going to be able to potentially fall back upon. And so I think that Georgia's just in a great spot at that position group right now. And I think Gavin Honore recognized that and also recognized some of the other options that he's going to have available to him.
As always, stay glued to Dawgs247.com. Ben does a great job with all the recruiting news, all the recruiting nuggets that you need to know there. All right, guys, it's starting to feel a little bit like spring. We're starting to get into that spring weather, hoping that it'll stay warm these next few weeks. But with that comes the start of Georgia baseball. They started their 2026 season this past weekend. We brought on Olivia Sayer, our Georgia baseball beat writer, to let us know what she learned in that series against Wright State and what she's looking for going ahead. I want to welcome Olivia Sayer back to the show. Got a lot to get into with Georgia baseball starting their 2026 season. Over the weekend, a successful 3-game series against Wright State. Georgia goes 2-1. They win the first game 13-1 on Friday, split the doubleheader on Saturday, a 9-0 win to start the day, and then they lose the last game 6-3. So, Olivia, just get us started. What sort of stood out to you from that opening series for Georgia? What kind of sticks with you a few days later?
I think there was a lot of good from this opening series. Obviously, you probably want to earn the sweep, especially given that your non-conference schedule isn't as strong as maybe some of the other teams in the SEC. But at the end of the day, in baseball, the goal is to win series, and that's exactly what Georgia did. As for that loss, I also think a positive is that offensively, it actually looked pretty good, aside from the lack of runs scored. They were hitting balls hard. They were just going directly to the other team. And so I think the fact that you were still getting some hard hit balls in play, you look, Trey Phelps almost tied it there in the 9th inning. I think the first out of the 9th inning was over 100 miles an hour exit velocity. So I think there was a lot of good from the offense. And then pitching overall the entire weekend was really solid. Yes, you had a couple of guys falter in that series finale, but overall I think there was a lot of good to take away from it.
I want to get into some specifics. I want to start with what you wrote on Friday. Just very interested in Joey Volchko and Caden Aoki and the combination of those two guys. Just what you saw from what they showed in their first game of the season, and just how hard that is for these opposing hitters with how different these two guys pitch.
Absolutely. I'm smiling when you said that because as someone who's just such a big baseball fan, it is so fun to watch the two of them, especially when they go back to back, because you have Joey Volchko. He's a guy that will throw almost 100 miles an hour. He didn't hit it in that series opener, but apparently he did during fall camp. I think he touched 97, 98. So he's just a really hard thrower. And then you have Caden Aoki, who comes in directly after that and just dots the strike zone. Wes Johnson compared him to Greg Maddux a little bit during fall camp, saying his location and his precision is really good. And I think Trey Phelps said it best after the game. He said he was sitting in the dugout. He got the card saying that Aoki's about to relieve Volchko on the mound, and he said they're done. Like, there's no way Wright State's coming back from this, because it's just such a complete contrast in terms of their styles, and it keeps the hitters off balance, and we saw that on Friday night. And I think that'll be a really good piggyback going forward.
Yeah, comparing anyone to Greg Maddux, that's high praise around here. That is for sure. Well, I wanted to ask you about another pitcher, a guy you saw on Saturday, a guy that can pitch and can hit, and Kenny Ishikawa. What did you see from him? What he was able to do in his Georgia debut, and just how productive you think he can be, both as a pitcher and as a hitter?
He's almost like Volshko and Aoki into one. I mean, I think what illustrates it best is he threw a pitch 60 miles an hour in that game. He said it was his show-off pitch. He does it because he thinks it would be hard to hit. And then directly after that, he threw a 95-mile-an-hour fastball and he froze the hitter down the strike zone. So I just think he can switch speeds like that, which is really hard. Wes said it after the game as well. It's really hard for opposing batters to see that back-to-back. And obviously he didn't throw many pitches 60, but he was throwing 77 and then mixing that right up with those 95. And so I think just the contrast in his style is going to be really good for him going forward. And as far as the hitting, a lot to be impressed with. He reached base a lot. I believe he reached base 4 out of 5 times in that series finale a couple hours after he threw 4.1 hitless innings. Wes said he's a dynamic player. All of the players said he's dynamic and he's going to be fun to watch, and we definitely saw it this weekend.
I was going to be a fan of a guy who's going to work an ephus in there every once in a while. You had mentioned in the lead up to that series that Wes Johnson had talked about wanting to get a lot of people involved, and they did in that first series, 15 different hitters to the plate. What did you think of them trying to work different guys in, and how valuable this time of year is to give guys opportunities to figure, who is going to have specific roles on this team?
It's very valuable. And I think when you look at a team like Georgia who relies so much on that transfer portal, as a result, you're going to have a veteran team, which means you're going to lose a bunch of that talent. You're going to have a bunch of turnaround year in, year out. And so it's going to take some time to sort of figure out who those guys are. I don't think Georgia's ever going to be a team that runs that 1 through 9 lineup the same every single day. I think Colby Branch is going to stay at short and Trey Phelps is going to stay at third, is what Wes Johnson has said. But aside from that, almost every other role is up for grabs. And that's what these non-conference games are for, is to kind of figure out how you're going to work that lineup in. And I think we saw that a lot this past weekend. I don't believe they're going to continue to use 15 players. Wes said as much after the game on Saturday night. But I definitely think they're still going to utilize those matchups because they've always been such a big matchup-oriented team in terms of here's what the statistics say of who fares better against this starting pitcher. And I believe they're going to rely on that some more.
So we've got some more action for Georgia this week. They're going to play USC Upstate on Wednesday, then a 3-game series against Samford over the weekend. What are you looking for? What do you want to see out of these next few games for the Bulldogs?
If I'm Georgia, I just want to see them continue this momentum into this week. I think, like I said earlier, there was a lot of good from this season opening series in terms of plate discipline, pitching performances, and just carry that forward and maybe see if Dylan Vignew, who I'm expecting to start the series finale again, can give you a little more length and consistency in that starting rotation and just sort of figure out who those bullpen guys are, because game 1, you have that really good combination with Volshko and Aoki. Game 2, you have a really good starter in Ishikawa, but after that, all those roles are still sort of up for grabs. So just using these non-conference games to figure out who's sliding into what roles in that bullpen.
Before we get out of here, Olivia, I want to put you on the spot and talk a little bit about the Atlanta Braves. I think the last week when Kipp and Ben were on, we talked about Spencer Schwellenbach being hurt. We had just learned that as we were recording. Hurston Waldrop's hurt now, dealing with elbow soreness. Should we be worried? Is it time to panic already? What do you think about where the Braves are right now?
I think everyone said it best. They should have signed another starter into that rotation, because I don't care how many guys you have coming back healthy, something's going to come up, and you can't rely on a bunch of guys coming off that elbow, that shoulder, that whatever fatigue, soreness they have, inflammation in some cases, to go out and give you as many innings for every single start. And look, I love Alex Anthopoulos. I think what he did in 2021 will forever be etched into Braves history. I've been around him a couple of times. He's been nothing but great. But you had to have gone out and signed another starter. And it didn't even have to be top tier, so to say, but just someone that can fill those innings, because I saw a tweet about it the other day. Bryce Elder is probably going to come up and throw a bunch of innings for the Braves this season. And aside from that, you don't really have that many guys that you can rely on if Waldrop's hurt, Schwellenbach's hurt. Lopez, I saw, was topping 91, 92 on a fastball the other day, which is really low. Strider, first year coming off of that injury fully after some mixed results last year. You just don't know what the starting – Chris Sale's up in age, so you just don't really know what the starting rotation is going to be. And I think they would have liked to have a little bit of insurance there.
Yeah, I am already thinking about how my happiness in the spring and the summer is probably going to be tied to Bryce Elder, which is just not it's not a good combination. It's not a good place to be, Olivia.
Absolutely. And he's funny because he can go out and give you 7 one-hit, 2-hit innings, and then the next day he'll give up 13 in the first inning. So hopefully he has a little bit of consistency for the Braves' sake, but it'll certainly be interesting to see what happens there.
Olivia, thanks again for popping on. And again, want to encourage the folks watching and listening. Check out Olivia's baseball coverage at Dawgs247.com. She does a fantastic job covering the Diamond Dogs.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure.
We've got some more Georgia basketball to talk about, but Kipp, I saw you shaking your head as we were talking about the Braves portion of our interview. You wanna give your thoughts on where things are?
It's worse since you spoke to her. Like, Hurston Waldrop's got loose bodies in his elbow. I'm learning more about like injuries every week with the Braves. I mean, the fact that we signed Dominic Smith as a first baseman today, I'm already worried. I'm like, what's wrong with Matt Olson? Like, what do we, like, they're even signing guys is bad news right now for the Braves. So yeah, I think that what she says is like even more true as we record this podcast. I'm worried about our next podcast at this point because we're just, can we just put Spencer Strider and Ronaldo Lopez in bubble wrap until August? Like, just put them to the side and just, yeah. I mean, we're already going to have 150 innings, 170 innings of Bryce Elder right now. Like, we needed to sign 2 pitchers to begin with. And so, yeah, let's leave it right there. That's as succinct as I can be about that. But we're not in a great place right now. And it is February 17th.
Yeah, not feeling great about it. Justin Felder, I think that was yesterday, on Monday, tweeted that a bald eagle was circling over the field, and I asked if it was a buzzard because that's sort of where it feels like things are. Ben, you got any thoughts about where the Braves are right now?
I mean, I don't really have Atlanta sports are as down as they've ever been. Right now, I think the hope and the prayer is Anthony Edwards will one day be an Atlanta Hawk. That is what we have right now, and that's what I'm going to operate under.
Well, let's talk about Georgia basketball for a minute here. The Bulldogs are in a really tough situation, and as I wrote on Tuesday, it's kind of put up or shut up time for the Georgia Bulldogs. They are 17-8 right now, 5-7 in SEC play. Coming off a rough week, they lost to Florida 86-66 on Wednesday. Not a big shock. I mean, Florida right now is the class of the SEC. Everybody's trying to catch Florida. The game on Saturday, though, they lost at Oklahoma 94-78. Very disappointing game. Georgia shot 71% from the field in the first half, and they only led by 2, which I kind of knew at that point that was not a good situation to be in. Oklahoma hit, I think, 14 threes in that game. Really hot. I don't know if y'all saw the popcorn machine that caught on fire. That was a new one. But I think Oklahoma's three-point shooting was about as hot, and Georgia couldn't do much with that. Tough situation. Jeremiah Wilkinson, MIA for those 2 games. The good news is they get ready to play Kentucky on Tuesday night. That's 9 p.m. Eastern time in Lexington. That Jeremiah Wilkinson appears to be back. He was not on the availability report, so hoping for Georgia's sake he is available. He's their top scorer. They need him, especially if they're going to contend in Lexington. It's been a place that Georgia has not won a game in quite some time. I think it was 2009 was the last time. Ben, I'll start with you. How are you feeling about Georgia's NCAA tournament chances? Right now, a lot of the bracketology still has them in, but that's not as much a projection of the future as it is, hey, this is where they are right now. How are you feeling about their tournament hopes as they look to, there's 3 weeks left of the regular season. They still got some more work to do.
Yeah, I think that Georgia having, like, I think it was Lenardi had them as the last 4 buys. Like, I think that's misleading because, like you said, that's based on, like, if everything ended today, essentially, this is where it would be at. And you look, we did the forecast last week. We talked about that Oklahoma game, not wanting to put this road SEC game against a team that had just, been up 18 or whatever on Vanderbilt. Like, they are playing pretty good basketball right now, and Georgia's not. And so it was just like, you didn't want to put must win label on it, but it had must win vibe to it. It's hard to see a path. I gotta admit, like, you gotta at the very least steal one that you're not supposed to have, whether that's the Kentucky one, Alabama. I just think it's hard. Like, and then you still have to win the ones that you're supposed to win. Like, you still have to win the Texas game now, which isn't a gimme by any chance. You got to win the South Carolina game, the Mississippi State game, which, yeah, you're supposed to win those games, but you've also gone on the road against Texas and Oklahoma and laid complete duds in the second half. I mean, that's 2 road games at Oklahoma and at Texas where Georgia was in a competitive game at halftime, and it turned out to not be a competitive game whatsoever. And that's tough. I mean, I know analytically Jeremiah Wilkinson is not like this wowing player, and he's actually been a liability in some respects with the analytics at times. It just feels like Georgia creates a lot more havoc defensively that turns into transition points when Jeremiah Wilkinson is out there. I will be the first to admit I don't have the stats to back that up or know for sure that that's the case, but it just feels like there is more mayhem going on defensively for Georgia when their longer, taller point guard is out there, or a guy that can defend point guards is out there. And I think that Georgia is at its best when it's creating turnovers, getting in transition, turning it into a kind of silly track meet type of game. And they just haven't done that the last 2 weeks, really. And they got to get back to that. Maybe Jeremiah Wilkinson helps you get back to that, but going on the road at Kentucky is not really the easiest way to start trying to turn the corner on that.
No, and you hit on a lot of what I wanted to say, but I think Georgia has to have at least 3 more wins. They feel much better if they have 4 more, but you look at the analytics, look at Torvik, ESPN Analytics, they've only got them favored to win 3 more games, which to Ben's point means, so, you have to take care of business. That's the minimum where you're supposed to, but that means, beating a Texas team that beat you by 20, back on January 24th. That means winning at Mississippi State. Georgia has not won in Starkville since 2016. Mississippi State has won 7 of the last 8 against Georgia. So they're in a bad spot. And my thing, you look at trying to get the wins you can. The games ahead, this is to end the regular season. At Kentucky, home against Texas, at Vanderbilt, home against South Carolina, home against Alabama, at Mississippi State. I mean, I think realistically, you got to beat Texas. You got to pull off that upset at Vanderbilt, which is not going to be easy. But I think that you got to do that. Win at home against South Carolina, and then win at Mississippi State. That gets you to 4, but you absolutely have to have 3. And I think this Texas game on Saturday, you want to win in Kentucky, in Lexington at Kentucky. I don't see that happening. I think the Texas game is a must win. If Georgia loses that game, I think you're going to see them slide off the bubble. So that one is really the one to me. That's kind of where it starts and stops. If they lose that game, they're in real rough shape. Kipp, what do you think about where Georgia is right now, their tournament hopes, and the road ahead?
I think the book kind of got out on Georgia is like keep them from the free throw line, just like force them into being a jump shooting team. And then, I mean, how many threes did Oklahoma make? Like 15? Nobody's made that many threes in a game against Georgia this season, but at the same time, like that's also the book. Like you make double-digit threes against Georgia, they're not going to be able to keep up in that kind of like shootout. If we're going to go possessions, they'll love that. Like, hey, that's what we do. We just spam possessions. We don't know what's actually going to happen when we get the ball on our side of the court, but we're just going to, we're going to keep pace and we'll make up for it on the next one. But if you go against a team that has 3-point ability, like that is that's a recipe for disaster for Georgia. And unfortunately, Kentucky Alabama. I mean, Texas, they're all shooting like, I think 35% over 35%. That's not good. That's not, I think the best chance for Georgia's probably the Alabama game. Like, you just got to shut down a lottery pick at point guard. And I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. I hate to say this, but I think like that's where they'll need a guy like Jeremiah Wilkinson. Like, they'll need his availability. You mentioned his length on the other pod, not having him out there. Now we're seeing kind of like how valuable he is on the defensive side. You got to have better perimeter defense down the stretch if you're going to pull an upset. And I think that's what Georgia needs. They have to win the three that they have a good shot, and they got to upset somebody. I think it's Alabama. I don't love their chances in any of those games against Kentucky, Alabama. I think Vanderbilt, that's probably the toughest one in my opinion. So I think we could all have three different opinions on which game they had the best chance on, but it's still they're fighting an uphill battle right now to know going into the SC tournament that they're a tournament team.
Yeah, it's a tough situation to be in, and Kipp made a good point that I wanted to harp on. They've struggled to get to the free throw line. That Florida game, which again, I don't think anyone was anticipating they were going to beat Florida in Athens, but I think they might have had 2 free throws in that first half. Like, that was just, it's not going to, work out. That's not going to be enough. Oklahoma hit 14 threes in that game on Saturday, and the guy I look to, especially like Kipp talking about the Alabama game, I think you need Santos Surreal to turn it up. I mean, that is their recipe for beating a team like Alabama, is getting those bigs and taking advantage of an Alabama team that had to turn to a G League player because they didn't have anybody else. So again, 9 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday, Georgia is going to play at Kentucky, and then on Saturday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern time, they come back to Athens to play Texas. Hey, while we're talking Georgia basketball, Georgia women's basketball pulled off an upset, beat number 5 Vanderbilt. I believe they're 20-6 right now. Shout out to Coach Abe. They've done a really good job. I thought this was a make or break year for them. They get a big win, and I think between the two, there's at least one of these Georgia basketball teams going to the NCAA tournament. All right, before we get out of here, I wanted to end on this note, kind of a sad note. Robert Duvall passed away, 95 years old. I mean, for me, probably Mount Rushmore of actors, or at least in that conversation. Fantastic. One of my favorites. Saw a lot of folks over on the Junkyard talking about Lonesome Dove. I know that's a big hit. His roles in The Godfather. I watched Tender Mercies, which he won an Oscar for last night, that I'd never seen. It was very, very good. Kipp, you were in that thread where we were talking about Robert Duvall. You got a favorite movie, a favorite performance?
I mean, Apocalypse Now, that's the easy one. Like, I love the smell of napalm in the morning. It's tough, man. Like, if he's in the movie, like, that's the thing about the thread. People are just pulling up random movies and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot. Like, but the movie's going to be good. Like, if you just see him on the opening credits, you're like, all right. I mean, like, I don't know, like, didn't have any plans for the next 2 hours, but I'll sit here. I'll watch Days of Thunder again on TBS. I mean, sure, like, why not? And I admit I actually did that a couple weeks ago. So I'll be doing it again. I mean, just pull up his filmography. Like, just pick a random one, find one you haven't seen, because it's going to be good. Like, he just never missed.
Yeah, he was fantastic. Told some folks over on the Junkyard. He reminds me, I think of him and Gene Hackman in the same category of where I don't feel like I saw any movies that they were in that were bad. And Kipp just hit on that. I mean, even if you just stopped in like the 70s with Robert Duvall, with Apocalypse Now, with the 2 Godfather movies, with The Conversation that I forgot he was in with Gene Hackman. He's one of my favorites. And then, I mean, everybody knew on the board I was bringing the Days of Thunder. I mean, Rubbin's Racing. Like, he was the perfect crew chief. If they don't have Robert Duvall in that movie, I just don't think it's as good. Ben, you got any favorite Robert Duvall movies, anything that sticks out?
I mean, I think I just saw on his filmography, his first movie ever was also probably the first thing I ever saw him in, To Kill a Mockingbird. I didn't even realize that he was Boo Radley in that movie. That was like one of his first things. Also a tearjerker of a movie, but he is great in this John Q with him and Denzel Washington. One of the hardest movies to watch, period. Just like such a hard movie to watch. Like, so just makes you do a lot of thinking, and it's very, very sad, but also incredible movie. So you guys mentioned the other ones that I probably would have. I mean, I'm a Godfather guy, so I would have to go with Godfather #1 over anything. But beyond that, go watch John Q if you're trying to get in your feels a little bit.
Godfather 1 or Godfather 2, Ben?
I mean, I'm a Godfather 2 guy, but you can't go wrong with either of the first two Godfathers, in my opinion.
I think I've come around. I used to say 1, but I think I'd pick 2. You got one between 1 and 2, Kipp?
I'm 2, and I'm 2 in most movies. I just think the bound, like, it's you get the tables turned in that one usually. Like, there's just more drama when you're in the second part of a trilogy. So I'm a big just middle movie guy. So really like that. And Falling Down was another good movie with him. Really, really good movie. And Gone in 60 Seconds is just an easy, like, I mean, not the best movie in the world, but just having him in there, like, it's an incredible movie just because he's in the movie.
I'm going to shout out to Secondhand Lines, which I think was on TBS like every other weekend when I was a kid. And then I haven't seen either of these, but just clips from him and Kicking and Screaming and Four Christmases. That was all over Twitter, so that was pretty neat to see. All right, we'll end the episode right there. Thanks to Kipp and Ben for popping on. Thanks to Olivia for popping on and talking Georgia baseball. Again, she does a great job covering Georgia baseball for us at Dawgs 24/7. Be sure to go and subscribe to Dawgs247.com. Got all kinds of intel on there. And again, spring practice is about a month away. I think all three of us are trying to prep and get ready for that to get here. Georgia basketball, as we talked about, Georgia baseball, Georgia football recruiting, a lot still going on there. Subscribe to the Junkyard Dawgcast wherever you get your podcast. Please rate and review. Helps us a ton. Gets the podcast out there for other people to find. Go subscribe to the YouTube Dawgs 24/7, the TikTok Dawgs 24/7. Lots of good stuff there. And again, off season rolling right along, but we do not lack for stuff to talk about and to write about. So we're going to end it right there. For Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.